Hello, so this video is an introduction to looking at vectors at the grade 5 level. And there's going to be a series of videos on this, but just this video is a really quick intro to what vectors actually are. Okay, so what are vectors? Vectors describe movement from one point to another. So an example of a vector is this blue thing down here. This is a vector, and there are two key things that you can get from a vector, which are its magnitude and its direction. What do these words mean? Magnitude just means how large, how long the vector is. So this blue vector here, it's just got this magnitude that you can see here. Okay, it starts here and it ends over here. It's just how long your vector is. A bit like if you talk about a magnitude earthquake, the larger the magnitude, the larger the earthquake is. The same thing with vectors. Direction is kind of what you would expect, what direction your vector is going in, and that is described by the arrow that you can see on the vector, and that is a really key feature. So you can see this vector here, it is going in this direction because the arrow is pointing in that direction. So two key things, magnitude and direction. So if you need to make a note of that, I definitely would do. So this vector here, this green vector, is a different vector. Just thinking about it, what do you note about its magnitude and its direction? Well, hopefully we can see that the magnitude is larger than the blue vector. Literally, the vector is longer, but also it is going in the opposite direction. And we can see that because the arrow is literally going the opposite way to the blue vector. So two key things there which make up a vector. Its magnitude, how large it is, how big it is, and its direction. Okay, this thing here, vector notation, a really, really important thing that we need to get to grips with. So let's get into it. Let's get my pen ready. Okay, so vector notation. Let's say, right, we've got this vector here going from A to B. Vector notation just means how do you describe that vector? How can you write down that vector? Well, we use special notation to write the vector A to B, and it is going from A to B because the arrow is pointing in this direction. So we're starting from A and we're going to B. We can write this vector, we can describe it as A to B with an arrow over the top, okay? But you might also see it written as a lowercase a in bold. Okay, so like this. So you could describe this vector either as AB with an arrow over the top or lowercase bold a. And this bold text is often used in textbooks. So if you see vector notation in textbooks or online, you might see it written in bold lowercase letters. Okay, but actually also, really important to note, you might also see this vector written like this. So that is also the same thing as writing lowercase a again, but this time with a line underneath. So this means the same thing as this, which means the same thing as this, but this is more used if you're kind of writing it by hand, okay? So if you're going to write it by hand, you would use a line underneath the A because you can't write bold letters by hand. It's very tricky, okay? So you could use AB, capital AB with an arrow over the top. In textbooks, often they use bold letters, and if you're writing it by hand, you would write it with a line underneath your letter. So really, you could also write that being equal to A underline. It's just different ways of writing the same thing. That's all it means, okay? So I would definitely make a note of that because it might confuse people, but it shouldn't. It's just describing the vector in three different possible ways, okay? What about this vector down here below? Well, if we reverse the direction of the arrow so that it's going in the opposite direction, we get a negative of the vector A. So we've got the same, very similar vector, right? It's the same magnitude, but this time the direction is now going in the opposite direction. So we're going from B to A, and that is important. We're starting out at B, and we're going to A. So we now write this vector as B to A in capitals, with an arrow over the top, and it is the negative direction, opposite direction, so we write this as negative lowercase bold a. Again, you could also write that being equal to minus A underlined. Okay, these all mean the same thing, just different ways of describing the vector. So there you go, minus lowercase bold a, or you could write it as being equal to minus A underlined. They mean the same thing. So that is it for this video, just different ways of writing a vector. Okay, thank you.